I still remember when my wife and I were approached about the possibility of leading our first small group. Now, my experience with church groups before this was in Sunday school, with different age groups meeting on the church campus before the Sunday morning service. But our current church had small groups that met in homes around the city. Although we had been attending a small group for a short time, the thought of leading one just wasn't on the radar. Now, I'm an introvert by nature, so the thought of inviting a group of people into our home every week so we could do life together was not appealing. Plus, we were newly married, and the group we were tasked for leading was a young marrieds group. Now, how on earth were we going to help other couples be better spouses and parents when we didn't have a clue ourselves? So all the normal insecurities and doubts told me to say no. I don't have it all together enough to lead anyone. I don't know enough about the Bible to lead a Bible study. Our tiny house couldn't fit everyone. I don't have enough time for something else every week. Will I have to be friends with everyone in the group? So with some hesitation and encouragement from my more extroverted and friendly wife, Jenny, we said yes to leading our first small group. 20 years and counting, in 3 cities and 6 different living rooms, we're still at it. Did you know that the number one barrier to someone stepping up to lead a small group is the word leader? We all have this preconceived idea of what a leader should be, sound, and look like. Now, I imagine someone who is tall, extroverted, a scholar, forceful, basically someone who is the opposite of me. But there's no template for an effective leader. Every successful leader is flawed. In fact, the Bible is filled with damaged and flawed leaders. Let me just list just a few. Adam, the first human being, couldn't lead his own family. His firstborn ended up killing his brother. Eve, the first woman, became greedy and took the first bite literally into sin. Noah, the last righteous man on earth at the time, got drunk and slept in the nude in a full view of his kids. Abraham, the forefather of faith, let other men walk off with his wife on 2 different occasions. Sarah, the wife of Abraham, let her husband sleep with another woman and then hated her for it. Moses, the humblest man on the face of earth, had a serious problem with his temper. David, the friend of God, concealed his adultery with a murder. Peter, the man Jesus called the Rock, denied Jesus 3 times. Paul, the author of most of the New Testament, was a Pharisee who persecuted Christians before becoming one and was hampered by a thorn in the flesh after becoming one. Now, I could go on, but you get the picture. The Bible shows us men and women who had issues just like us. Yet God still used them to build a movement that has not slowed down in over 2,000 years, even with the death of the only perfect leader, Jesus. To help us know what a small group leader is, let's consider a few things he or she is not. Someone who has all the answers. A leader who has all of the answers is not a leader anyone should follow. First, it's impossible, but most of all, we want to follow someone humble enough to admit they don't know it all. Someone who can teach the Bible weekly. There are some with the gift of teaching, but a small group experience is not about one person teaching and the rest learning. It's a shared discussion. We are all growing together. A small group leader is a facilitator of a synergistic conversation with the Bible as a guide. Someone who is everyone's best friend. Our job as small group leaders is not to make deep relationships with every person in the group. Not only is that unwise, but it's also unhealthy. Our goal should be to find 2 or 3 same-sex people in the group we can disciple outside of the group time and help others in the group do the same. I identify with what Paul said in 1 Corinthians. I came to you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling. My speech and my preaching were not with persuasive words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith may not be based on human wisdom, but on God's power. Isn't that freeing? God chose me and you, sinners and flawed human beings, because he wants all of our faith to be in him, not in our own abilities. When your group members look at you, they are not putting their faith in you as the leader, but in the Spirit's power working through your weakness. Peter gave us this definition of leadership as he exhorted the elders of the first century church. He said, "Shepherd God's flock among you, not overseeing out of compulsion, but willingly as God would have you, not out of greed for money, but eagerly, not lording it over those who are entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory." The elders of the church were put in place to shepherd the congregation in the same way we as small group leaders are to shepherd the portion of our church. Although we're not that familiar with shepherds in today's society, God chose shepherds throughout the Bible to lead his people. Abraham, Jacob, Moses, and David were all shepherds chosen as leaders by God. Jesus even referred to himself as a shepherd. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. John 10:14. So why did God choose shepherds? Well, good shepherds lead with their heart. They know each sheep in their care and will work hard to get them to their destination. The small group's leader's role is to help the people in their group take their next spiritual step to get them from where they are to where they need to be. A shepherd leader will work hard to make sure that no one is left behind on their spiritual journey. Good shepherds also lead with compassion. Jesus, the ultimate shepherd, set the example as a leader who always had compassion for his followers, even when it was the most inconvenient. We see in the book of Matthew, Jesus withdrawing for a time alone to grieve immediately after receiving the news of the death of John the Baptist, but he still could not escape the crowds. So when Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there by a boat to a remote place to be alone. When the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd, had compassion on them, and healed their sick. Matthew 14. Even though Jesus had every right to not care for another person at that moment, he saw sheep without a shepherd and had compassion for them. There will be many times as a small group leader where a member of your group will have a need at the most inopportune moment. It may be a phone call late at night. It may be someone who wants to stay after group to talk. It may be someone at church who needs to grab some time in the lobby during the service you're about to attend. While inconvenient, it's at those times where we have to remember the compassionate example of Jesus. Good shepherds also lead from the front. When he has brought all of his own outside, he goes ahead of them. The sheep follow him because they know his voice. John 10:4. A leader that people who will follow is a leader willing to go first. This may mean sharing a vulnerable story with the group to set the example of authenticity. The group will model the behavior you display. If you want your group to be open, open your heart first. If you want the group to serve, serve them first. Leading from the front does not mean dictating direction. It means setting the example for others to follow. Good shepherds lead sacrificially. There will be times when leading your group will be a sacrifice. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. John 10:11. While your sacrifices will probably not involve laying your life down for someone, opening your home to a group of people weekly is a sacrifice. You have to keep the house clean, put up the pets, pull out all the extra chairs, make sure there is food. It's exhausting to host a group. You'll need occasional breaks to not burn out, but that sacrifice of time and effort will lead to a group that bonds through consistency. At the end of our time as leaders, we want to know that we led our flock well. We can look to Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and follow his example of shepherding his flock. Though we will not be perfect, we want to lead from the heart, lead with compassion, and lead sacrificially. So, what is the goal of leading a small group? Creating disciples who then create disciples should always be the final goal of any small group. Jesus made this clear with his commission to his followers before he returned to heaven. He said, Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching to them to observe everything I've commanded you, and remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. Therefore, we must always gather as a group, not just for the sake of gathering, but for the goal of helping people develop into mature believers. Note that Jesus did not say teaching them everything I've commanded you. He said teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you. Of course, we cannot observe what Jesus commanded unless we know what he commanded. But it needs to be clear that though the study is important, the fruit of the study is what leads to fully devoted followers of Christ. Discipleship is not a static process. It will always involve movement towards something. If you want to know if people in your group are developing in their faith, look for these two movements in their lives. 1, movement toward Christ. The original disciples followed in the footsteps of Jesus. Where he was leading, they were following. Consequently, their lives were becoming more like Christ as they followed closer and closer. The disciples in your group will begin to display more of the characteristics of Jesus as they move closer to him. 2, movement toward others. Someone who is being discipled will want to share what they're experiencing with others. When Jesus changed the Samaritan woman's life with a conversation at the well, she ran immediately to tell everyone she knew to come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah in John 4:29? When your life has been changed by the gospel, you want to tell everyone you know. You should also see your group members begin to practice the one another's within the group. It becomes clear as you read through the Bible that we were not meant to walk through this life on our own. The original small group spent a majority of their time taking care of one another's needs. By practicing the one another's, they also allowed members to discover and use their spiritual gifts within the group. You can see examples of these gifts: apostleship, discernment, encouragement, evangelism, faith, giving, healing, helps, hospitality, intercession, leadership, ministration, mercy, miracles, prophecy, pastoring, teaching, wisdom, and knowledge, woven through the acts of service toward each other. Creating biblical community in a small group is allowing room for the Holy Spirit to minister to and through group members. As each person is growing spiritually, you will discover, and they will discover their spiritual gifts and in turn disciple someone else. This is how generations of disciples are created and leaders are developed.